Welcome, everybody. So I see everyone's streaming in, which is nice to see, and no doubt we'll have more join after we started. But it's good to welcome you to the latest BCS author webinar. This is a regular series. This is about supporting professionals with some of the industry's biggest issues. Today, specifically, we're looking at careers, the breadth of careers available, and we have one of our expert authors to talk to us, of course. So we're going to say hi to Christina in a minute, but Christina, if you can just give everybody a quick wave. There we go. Lovely. Good.
Hi, everyone.
Just by way of introduction, this will be recorded. In fact, it is being recorded, just so that you're aware. We would encourage you to ask questions. That's what this is about, partly. Christina's going to talk about her book and some of the interesting stuff that's in there. It's going to help your career. But if you've got any burning issues, please just put them straight into the chat. We'll pick them up as we go, or if there's a few, we'll collect together at the end. We can do it that way as well. So getting into tech doesn't mean just learning how to code. There's so many things that you can do. So today we're going to talk to Christina. This is Christina's first solo book, Careers in Tech, Data and Digital. I know you've written for us before, Christina, but we're really pleased to talk to you today. So first of all, welcome, and tell us a bit about your journey to get here, if you would.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you for that warm welcome, and thanks everyone for joining us. So I never meant to work in tech. Like a lot of people who work in tech, we ended up there accidentally. I studied physics at university, and I knew that I didn't want to go any further with physics, but I didn't know what I wanted to do, apart from the fact that I knew that I wanted to work for the public sector. I looked at a number of different public sector roles, and the first role that I got happened to be a role in IT. So I never planned to go into IT. I never saw myself as a particularly technical person. I'm not really one for gadgets or gaming. And it took me a long time to be able to say that I am a tech professional or a woman who works in tech, because I really identified more with the idea of being a public sector professional. And it sometimes feels like tech roles are a reserved term for a particular set of roles in technology, which relate to things like software engineering and data science, those kind of more technical roles in tech. But actually, less than 20% of all the roles in tech have anything to do with developing code. So it took me a long time to realise that I was somebody who worked in tech, despite that my 20 plus career has entirely been in the tech sector. So the first job that I had, as I said, was working in tech, supporting implementation of IT projects and also end users of IT systems. And I was working within local authority social care. And social workers historically have some of the lowest levels of digital literacy. They don't get into social work because they like technology. They get into social work because they like supporting and helping people. So it was a really interesting role. I was supporting people who really didn't want to be using technology at all, but there was actually lots of ways that technology could help them in their roles. So from that role, it gave me a real breadth of experience of doing things like data migration, reporting, data quality, implementing new IT systems, training and support. It was a whole range of different aspects of IT that I got to do in that role. From there, I went to work for the NHS, where I worked for 12 years. And I've also worked in higher education, implementing large-scale IT and digital transformation projects. So I've been in tech for about 20 years now.
I mean, for somebody that didn't think they were in tech, that's quite a long career in tech, isn't it?
It really is, yeah. But I find a lot of people who do roles in tech, for example, like being a specialist recruiter who recruits for tech roles, people don't necessarily think that they work in tech. It's like, well, you talk to tech people all day. You have to understand all the different roles in tech. Of course you work in tech.
That's interesting. Now, as I've said, you've written for us before. I know you write for the BCS magazine as well, IT Now, which we have a regular column from you. But tell me, what made you want to go up from column length, 600 words, to book length, substantially longer?
So this book has been on my mind for a long time. I have done some work to support people to consider careers in business analysis, which is what my first book was about, and that's my professional discipline. But I realised that I had this idea that was wider than business analysis, and it was actually about all of the roles in tech. There's so much emphasis on more people, in particular young women, but young people in general, learning how to code, joining code clubs. And the framing of a tech career is all about learning how to code. Learn more about code, become a software developer. That's what a career in tech looks like. And that's not that surprising, because teachers and career advisors, they've never worked in tech. They don't know what that is. They're doing the best job that they can to inform young people about what a career in tech might be like. But it's really tech professionals that need to get out there and talk about their roles. And because I've worked in tech a long time, and because I've worked with so many tech professionals in so many different roles, I felt that I was well placed to introduce all of these different roles. And so I was really keen to shine a spotlight on all of the breadth of roles in technology, not just writing code.
I mean, that sounds really interesting. So do you think that this is more needed now than ever? Maybe with the advent of AI and things like that, where maybe some of our code is going to be written automatically anyway, that we need to think a bit more broadly?
I really do. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions. So people think, well, maybe we won't need tech professionals in the future because AI is just going to do it all for us. So I think helping people, particularly young people and people considering changing their careers, to understand the breadth of roles in tech and how a lot of them cannot just be replaced by AI is really important. And actually, AI is going to change how the types of roles that we need in tech and how a lot of those roles operate. We're already starting to see that, how AI can support us. And we're already seeing things like low code platforms, so where we can build systems that don't require very much in the way of coding skills at all. So it's some of the other roles in tech, the roles that focus on creativity, collaboration and communication. Those are the ones that are going to be most important, and those are some of the ones that I feature in the book.
That's interesting. I mean, the story of software is sort of increasing layers of abstraction, isn't it? So this is going to be another whole layer of abstraction. Do you think that that's important for people to understand the sort of just the basic nuts and bolts of the principles of how things work?
Are some core concepts in tech which are important for all tech professionals to understand. So that's, for example, things like data quality, how data moves around IT systems, how data relates to process. Also concepts like, what do we mean by cloud computing? What is that? Where is the cloud versus on-premise data storage? So I think there's some fundamental concepts which we really need all professionals to have a good understanding of. I don't think that that necessarily strays into people needing to be able to read or write a line of code. But I think the basic building blocks of tech that are relevant, whatever role you're doing in tech, are really important to emphasize. And I think one of the things that I talk about in the book is the software development lifecycle and the difference between operations or maintenance roles, the roles which are all about making sure everything that's supposed to work still works, and software development lifecycle roles, which are about introducing new things and introducing change. A lot of organizations have those, hold those quite separately in their teams or how their organization is set up, but increasingly organizations are trying to bring those two areas together. So bringing development alongside operations in a process that's called DevOps. So understanding those three ways of working in tech: software development lifecycle, operations or service delivery, and DevOps. I think that's really important for people to understand as well, because we can then see how different roles fit in to those different buckets of roles that exist in tech.
So how did you go about doing the research to get this information together, Christina? Because you've got the options of a lot of stuff there. This could have been huge, couldn't it? So you needed to narrow it down to
So
essentials, I suppose.
I thought it was going to be really easy, actually, to do this research and bring together a lot of information that I thought was already out there. But there was actually a lot of conflicting information about roles that exist. And there was also a lot of assumed knowledge. So, for example, you might look to professional bodies like the Association of Project Managers, for example, to tell you what is project management, how do you get into being a project manager. But there was a lot of assumed knowledge. They assumed that the people accessing their information already were project managers and knew what project management was all about. So there was very little quality sources of information saying this is what this role is, this is how you might get into it, these are the kind of skills that it requires. So I had to do a lot of research first to decide which roles I was going to feature, and then put together that kind of initial information about each of the roles. So why does this role exist? Who else does it interact with? What skill does it need? What kind of things does someone in that role produce? And it was really important to me that I include lots of different perspectives. So one of the things that I did for the book was hold a lot of interviews, because although I've worked in tech a long time, I've got my own views and opinions and biases about what all the different roles do. And I wanted to make sure that wasn't just representing my view, that there's a cross section of people across the tech sector. So people who've been doing it a long time, people who are quite new, people who have come through apprenticeship route, graduate routes, or just got a direct entry role in tech. So people who had followed different routes, had done different things and had different skills and interests. I wanted to showcase all of those things. And like I said, I thought it was just going to be collecting up a lot of information that was out there, but there was a lot of conflicting sources of information. For example, the National Careers Service has information about lots of different roles, but the roles in tech was really outdated. So they had things on there like data entry clerk. Well, I haven't come across one of those in my 20-year career.
Not since the 1980s, no.
No. And they also had a role of 3D printer, which was a person, like the person operating the machine rather than the machine. So I just felt, this is a little bit disconnected from the reality of what's going on in the tech sector at the moment. So it was really interesting to do that work and to also filter down the key roles in tech that I wanted to focus on.
I mean, that's interesting. A data entry clerk is very out of date, but tech is known for moving quite quickly. Were you worried that your information would go out of date, or how did you sort of address that issue?
Yeah, so I think it's easy to worry about that and think, oh, well, it's, things are going to move so quickly. There's almost no point putting information out there. But that really doesn't help the next generation of tech professionals. So we can tell them what we know now and what's true now in tech. And we can also make some predictions about the future. So in the book, I looked at some emerging technologies, things like AI, low-code platforms, but also things like the increased green tech agenda, so sustainability roles in tech, and things like electric cars, and the types of tech roles that we're going to need to support the continued evolution of that kind of tech. But if we look back across probably the last 30 or 40 years in tech, there has been a lot of stability in terms of things like testers, developers, project managers, analysts, data professionals. It doesn't change that quickly. And one of the things that I did was look at a lot of different job titles. So, for example, if you're a tech professional, you know that a software tester is pretty much the same job as a quality engineer. That's basically the same thing. But those titles sound quite different. And if you were outside of tech, how would you know that those were basically the same thing? So as well as deciding which roles I was going to focus on, I tried to find as many kind of synonyms for that job title. So if you're interested in software tester, you can also look at things like quality engineer, and all of the other similar job titles that are basically the same thing. And similarly for kind of business analyst, you might see things like process analyst or systems analyst. Those are very similar. And if you're interested in one, you might also look at some of these roles as well. So things do move quickly in tech, but not so quickly that it's not worth writing down and trying to communicate about the current situation.
Oh, that's really interesting. Actually, we just had a little comment come in there while you were talking about that, Christina from Darpit. As someone who has worked as data entry clerk, I agree even the use of tech to recognize text from image and proofread it is still outdated, even though necessary. Oh, that's an interesting perspective from
Mm,
someone who's actually worked in the role. Now, I want
yeah.
to pick up with you about the book as well, about the way it might progress, because it seems to me that this would lend itself to later editions as well, because it's still going to evolve. New job titles pop up from time to time, don't they? So maybe there's a long-term thing with this book as well.
Absolutely, and also relationship with other products, other things the BCS are working on. So, for example, there's IT careers quiz that the BCS have built, which
Mm,
ties in really nicely to the book. That's a free online quiz where you can answer some questions about yourself and your interests, and in some respects, your personality traits. So, you're a detail person or you're a big picture person, and it helps you to understand some of the roles that might be of interest for you. And so after doing that quiz, you can look at the book and find out a bit more detail about all of those different roles. So I think it's a valuable resource as well alongside a lot of the other things that the BCS are making available.
yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned some of the interviews that you've been undertaking to inform the book. Make sure you have a rounded out view, and we don't want to give away everything in the book now. That would be
Mhm,
not a good idea, would it? That
mhm.
would undermine the point of a book, in fact. But maybe we could just ask you to share one or two of your favorite insights from the interviews, or maybe even things that just surprised you.
Yeah. So I loved and was a little bit surprised by how honest people were prepared to be with me.
Okay.
So for example, I interviewed a very senior person who's in a CIO role, a Chief Information Officer role, and she said, I wanted to go into medicine, but I didn't have the grades. So I felt that that was really brave to kind of admit that she had one thing in mind and actually had to um, think again about the career path that she was going to take and how she found technology and how that has ended up being a really great career path for her. So people were really honest about the choices that they made, sometimes where they felt that they'd made the wrong choice or that they'd failed at something. And I don't think we talk enough about that with young people. We kind of present these careers as if they are, um, you know, all very well planned out and we're all making excellent
Mm,
decisions at every
mm,
step in our careers. But actually, most people aren't doing that. And particularly in tech, we're just making the best decision that we can right now. And tech opens up lots of opportunities, not always opportunities to progress, but opportunities to learn, to move sideways, to go back to a role or back to an organization that you worked at previously and enjoyed. It's not always about kind of relentlessly trying to progress up the same ladder
yeah.
and get more responsibility and more money. Tech gives lots more opportunities to do things like, do you want to manage a team? Don't want to manage a team. Okay, you can now move in this direction or that direction. Or there's a new piece of technology comes out and you happen to work on a project that gives you skills that happen to be in demand and that allows you to move in a different direction. So that was a real insight for me, how people have made decisions what sometimes that they felt weren't particularly good decisions or had kind of had to change their approach in their career. Um, and what else stood out to me? Um, One of the people that I interviewed was a specialist tech recruiter, and she really made the point that there's a lot of pressure on, particularly young people, but people in general, to have to find the perfect job, the perfect
Yeah.
career. And that's a lot of pressure. And actually, we should be talking about, well, what's a good job? What's a good job for you right now with your um, financial situation, with your family situation, with your level of experience and your level of education? It's not necessarily all about the perfect job. It's what's a good job now and what opportunities is that going to lead to? And all that emphasis on the perfect job might make people pass up things that would actually be great learning opportunities for them because they've got an idea of what the perfect employer looks like or what the perfect job looks like. So those two things really stood out to me from my interviews about openness that we're not all on kind of straight linear career paths, and that every choice that you make isn't going to be an amazing opportunity to progress in your career, but it will still be a learning opportunity, and we learn as much from the things that we get wrong as the things that went well in our career. And the second one is around that there's really no such thing as the perfect job. Actually, we need to be realistic about our skills and experiences and the jobs that are out there. And actually, that there's an opportunity to change the roles that we're in, because nobody does exactly what's in their job description. Everybody molds it a little bit to incorporate things that particularly interest them. And because tech moves quite quickly, there are opportunities to volunteer for things, to take on additional responsibilities, or to learn new technology and new skills.
It sounds like you've brought a level of pragmatism to that people are going to find useful. I mean, it's nice to read these inspiring stories of super successful entrepreneurs, but these tend to be outliers, don't they?
Absolutely. And not everybody that I interviewed went to university. Not most people hadn't studied computer science. And so I think there is a real myth around, well, if I haven't done computer science A level, or I haven't studied computing at university, then there's not going to be a role in tech for me. But actually, most people in tech, over 90% of tech professionals, do not have an IT or computer science degree. And that's from some research that the BCS did with coding Black females. So 90% of tech professionals don't have that background. So where do we all come from? Well, people have science, STEM backgrounds, arts or humanities backgrounds, and a lot of people are coming up through apprenticeship routes now and direct entry routes. So wherever you are, there is a route into tech for you.
Interesting. Now, let me ask you, Christina, was there any roles that, as you learned about them, you saw a new side to them you didn't know yourself, that maybe took you by surprise?
So a couple of the people that I interviewed had actually done psychology, either at degree level or studied it to some extent. And it really made me think about the relationship between how well-designed systems actually have a lot of overlap with human psychology. And the fields of user experience and user research are very much interested in how our brains work, how we think, where our eyes move on the screen, how we interact with systems and how we expect them to work. From simple things like you expect a next button to be on the right-hand side of the screen because we read left to right. If the next button was on the left, it would really confuse people. So that idea of kind of human-centric design and that relationship with psychology, I personally found really interesting, and I think is an area that's going to be more and more relevant as we continue to evolve a technology to be speaking our language, the human language. So not just voice interaction, but being able to read facial expressions, and how technology is potentially going to have to understand humans a lot more in the future. So we're going to need people who understand humans well.
Yeah, interesting. While you're listening, folks, please feel free to put questions in the chat if you want to. Let's move on to myths and misconceptions, Christine. That's one of the first things in your book, actually. Talk us through a few of those. Debunk some myths.
Yeah, so I touched on one, which is that if I haven't got a computer science degree, then there is no role for me in tech. Well, that is absolutely not true. Most people in tech do not have a computer science degree. You can come to tech much later in life, after you've been to university or even after you've had a few jobs. There is the opportunity to career change into tech. I've known a couple of really positive success stories of someone who was a window cleaner and got into tech later in life, and also someone who was a teacher. In fact, I know a couple of teachers who have made the transition into a tech career. So whatever choices you've already made, that doesn't preclude you from following a tech career later. Another one is around kind of gadgets and in particular gaming. So I spoke to a young girl at an event recently, and she said, "Oh, I haven't even got a games console. I haven't got an Xbox. So how could I work in tech? I was like, well, you definitely don't need to have a games console or interest in gaming to have a successful career in tech. But there's definitely a sense of those things being related in how young people think about a career in technology. They think about, in particular, gaming and an interest in the latest gadgets being somehow a prerequisite to getting into tech. A lot of people don't think that people like me work in tech. So, whatever that is, however you see yourself based on age, gender, ethnicity, a lot of people are ruling themselves out of a tech career. And I think that's partly to do with how the media portrays tech professionals as kind of hackers in hoodies in basements. Though, that's the main way that tech professionals get demonstrated in film and television, but that's really not the reality of a tech career. We have nice offices, open plan offices, windows, not in basements. Although my career started off in a not very pleasant IT attic, but things have moved on since then. So the perception of who works in tech and what does a career in someone who pursues a career in tech, what do they look like? So I think there's more to do in that area. I mentioned that teachers and career professionals are absolutely doing their best to understand all of the career options for young people that they're trying to advise. But there are so many different roles in tech and so many routes into tech that it's impossible for them to know. So one thing that I'm really passionate about is encouraging other tech professionals to get in front of groups of young people, whether that's schools, colleges or universities, or even just young people in their own network, in their families and friends, and talk to them about what their career looks like. How did you get into it? Why did it interest you? What do you enjoy? What kind of things do you do every day? I think there's a lot of power in tech professionals being able to talk about our roles. Most of us just say, if someone asks us what we do, we say, I work in tech, or we say the name of the organisation that we work for and hope that we don't get any follow-up conversation or follow-up questions. But we're doing a disservice to the young people and all the people around us by not sharing some of the insight in how we've got to where we are. So those are some of the main misconceptions around the routes in, what people in tech are like, and actually what you do all day. That I think there's a lot of worry that tech jobs are very technical, like they're going to be very difficult to understand, or I'm going to need to, it's going to be really difficult, complex information. That's not really true either. And there's also a lot of on-the-job learning opportunities for people in tech to keep their skills and knowledge up to date.
It's a bit of a black box situation for people looking from the outside sometimes, isn't it? A career in IT. So yeah, you make a very good point there. I must admit, Christina, when you said that somebody transitioned from being a window cleaner into tech, I thought there must be a joke in there somewhere, but I haven't got time to put it together. So if people can think of something, that'd be great.
Now this is on a postcard.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we've got a couple of questions coming. So let me read the first one to you. This is from Claire. As a parent of children at secondary school, I feel there's great potential for your book to form part of the careers advice offering, so children could consider roles which they may not otherwise have been aware of. Is this something you're exploring?
Well, it's something that I'm doing personally. I do regularly speak in schools and colleges about some of the messages in the book. I also engage with a number of organisations, charities and social enterprises, things like Ahead Partnership and See It, Be It. Those are a couple of those types of organisations that are near me that have those connections with schools and help people get into schools and talk about their careers. I've also done things like the BCS supports the Computing at Schools network, and I've spoken to teachers and careers leads through that network. And quite a lot of people have told me, I bought a copy of your book and donated it to my local secondary school for their careers library, which is a really easy way for tech professionals to provide an insight to to students and young people without having to feel like they have to get up there and speak in front of 150 teenagers, which is not the easiest thing. So there's things that we can all do as tech professionals, and definitely something that I'm pursuing personally in terms of trying to get the message of the book out there.
Lovely. Thanks for your question there, Claire. Darpit's put another question in. I'm currently working in my first year out of 3 of data and analyst apprenticeship at a small scale company. How easy will it be to get into a bigger market after apprenticeship?
I think there's a massive demand for data roles, so I think you're very well placed there in what you've chosen. I think organisations are quite open-minded in their hiring practices, where people are moving from, for example, small organisations to large organisations, public sector to private sector. Most organisations are quite open around that, and it's really about your skills, experience, and knowledge. And they wouldn't rule you out saying, oh, you've only worked in a small organisation. And actually, working in a small organisation often gives you lots of opportunities to have a wider role than in a larger organisation, where you sometimes have to stay in your lane a little bit because there's lots of different professionals and lots of different roles trying to work together in the same space. So I think there's a lot of advantages in working in a smaller organisation, and I'm sure completing that apprenticeship when you're looking for your next step, that there's going to be some great roles out there for you.
Lovely. I hope that was helpful, Darpit. Thank you for your question as well. Let's talk a little bit more about the contents of the book, Christina. You've got a lot of illustrations and diagrams going on there. Talk us through the thinking behind that.
So it was a lot of the illustrations have been done by an absolutely brilliant visual thinker, Grant Wright, who runs something called the Visual Jam, which is a visual thinking community. It was really important to me to try and bring the words to life. And the way that I have done that throughout my entire professional career is to create diagrams as well as documents. So I wanted it to be as engaging as possible so that the messages were easier to understand. I really like diagrams. I really like visual thinking, things like infographics. And so it was really important to me that there are lots of diagrams, and even things where there's kind of repeating structures throughout the book. I've used little icons to just help people navigate and say, okay, we're talking about this now, we're talking about outputs, or we're talking about key relationships with other types of professionals, and using consistent icons through the book as well to make it visually engaging, to have that colour in there and make it something that people want to pick up and read.
Interesting. Now, going back to the techie side of things, you talk a lot about development life cycles. You mentioned this a little bit earlier in our chat, but just talk us through a little bit more why you made sure those threads were there.
I think if you start by trying to understand tech by looking at all the job descriptions, it's a bit of a hide to nowhere. It's impossible to understand tech by looking at the different jobs people do. I think we really need to try to understand tech by saying, how does the tech sector work? And it primarily works in 2 key areas. One is delivering new stuff, and one is keeping things working. And most jobs in tech fall into one of those 2 categories, either delivering new things or keeping things working. So if you understand that, that allows you to think, okay, well, these are the types of roles that are about delivering new things. And that's where the software development life cycle is particularly important. But equally important is keeping all of the stuff working. So the IT help desk that you ring when your printer suddenly won't work in your office, when the Wi-Fi goes out, when the networks fail, all of these roles around kind of network engineering, IT help desks, service managers, also roles around things like accessibility, data management, knowledge management. All of those roles are really important as well. And if you understand how the tech sector is kind of structured and how it fits together, you can see how roles fall into one of those categories. But we can also envisage how tech works as a number of layers, starting at the bottom with the technology layer, which is kind of physical stuff, servers, wires, networks, bits of equipment, laptops, things that are actually joined together and things that physically exist. And then we can think about the data and application layer that sits on that. So if that physical infrastructure, things like servers and laptops and systems weren't there, the data would have nowhere to live. So understanding that kind of data and system software applications sits on that hardware. And then on top of that, we have a business layer. So if we're going to make decisions on how long we keep data, for example, as an organization, or if you're a financial institution, you've got different rules about people who are under 18 can have this type of bank account, and people who are over 18, they can have this type of bank account. Those business rules have to sit on top again as the next layer. And tech professionals, we need to worry about all three of those things. We need to worry about the technology, the data and application layer, and the business layer. And again, the roles in tech tend to specialize in one of those three layers. So we see data and application specialists, we see technologists, people like infrastructure engineers, infrastructure managers, cloud engineers, that kind of thing, worried about the most technical layer, and roles like change managers, delivery leads, business analysts at that business layer, understanding how the organisation works and how technology can facilitate that organisation to work better.
Interesting. Let me come on to another interesting issue then, BCS one particularly. We, as you know, we talk a lot about diversity because of the importance of differing views represented in projects and development and life cycles and so on and so forth, especially in light of the fact that some DEI things seem to be a bit undermined at the moment, don't they, in some regimes. I won't go into too much detail on that. But how did you decide to approach that sort of diversity subject in your book?
So there's some really interesting research from the Fawcett Society saying that where we keep going to underrepresented groups like young women, for example, and saying, gosh, not many young women work in tech, you should get into tech, that's actually putting them off because they think, well, if you're telling me that I'm going to be part of an underrepresented group, maybe there's a reason why more women don't work in tech. So presenting it from the point of view of facts and figures and only this percentage of people come from this background is actually not helping persuade people from the widest range of backgrounds to consider a career in tech. So one of the ways that I decided to address it was by having a really broad range of interviews. So people of different ages, making sure that both men and women were represented, the different pathways, people from different ethnic backgrounds, and also people from different socioeconomic backgrounds. Because one of the real challenges in tech at the moment is that it's becoming really elitist. Only about 9% of tech professionals come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. That's worse than architecture, it's worse than medicine, it's worse than law.
Okay.
So I
That's
think
not good.
that it's not good. And we need to be really addressing this idea of so many people who think people like me don't work in tech for whatever that reason is, whatever they see about themselves that's not represented in the tech workforce. We need to be demonstrating the breadth of roles in tech for a start, but also the breadth of professionals who do work in tech. So having role models, having people that you can see that you identify with, that look like you, that come from a similar background or have similar experiences to you is really important. So I didn't want to go down the kind of massive facts and figures route. I kind of partly addressed it through identifying role models from a range of different backgrounds, a range of different people, but also just kind of really trying to talk about the benefits of a tech career, that tech roles tend to be higher paying roles and not something that anybody should be ruling themselves out of.
Yeah, interesting. Well, we've got all the facts and figures at BCS if you need them, but your approach sounds a little bit more palatable, let's put it that way. So, now, I've got a note here to talk about career ladders and squiggly careers, but I'm thinking that that's what you were talking about earlier when you talked about people going in different directions. Anything you want to add there?
Yeah, so I think the concept of squiggly careers is really important. I do think we're presented, particularly when we're young, with this idea of career ladders, pick a thing and do it for 30 or 40 years, just keep working your way up. I don't think careers really work like that anymore, and particularly careers in tech. People who are early in their careers, young people now, they might end up actually having 2 or 3 or even 4 different careers because of the pace of change, not just of technology, but of society. So we need a workforce that is interested in continually learning. And that's in terms of developing our own skills, but also being curious about what's out there in terms of opportunity and technology, and thinking about the different ways that we might be able to progress our careers. Young people in particular are really interested in being their own bosses. So I think we're going to see a lot more emphasis on kind of entrepreneurial skills, and people kind of freelancing or having their own companies from quite an early age. So that's not something that necessarily exists too much now in the tech sector. It's usually kind of people who work for organizations, gain skills and experience, and later in their career start their own business or work in a freelance capacity. We definitely see a trend for younger people wanting to do that from the outset. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But also that these doors aren't one way. The squiggly career idea means that you can try something and think, actually, I've learned from that, but that's not the direction that I'm going to continue to move in. And that's the same goes for whether you're working for a large employer, small employer, or working for yourself. Once we make those decisions, we can always change our mind and go back again. So you can work for yourself for a while and then go and work for an employer again. These aren't one-way decisions. So I really think that idea of a squiggly career is really useful to have in mind, particularly from the early stages of your career, when a lot of the messaging is about the idea of career ladders and pick a thing and go for it.
Yeah, that's an excellent example from the point of view of the person doing the learning, of the individual. Are organizations clued into that? Do they maybe not look at CVs and think, oh, this person's been a bit all over the place? Or are they more used to that idea now?
I think we are getting more used to that idea. I think the idea of, having to explain gaps on your CV or not working for anywhere less than 2 years, I think those ideas are quite outdated now, particularly in tech. There is there's kind of making changes for personal reasons, but there's also the sector changing, organizations downsizing, merging. That means that people's CVs are, sometimes don't make as much sense as they might have done in the past. The choices that people make, the choices to kind of step outside permanent employment, doing things perhaps on a voluntary or part-time basis, and all of that work experience and personal experience being valid for roles that you might apply for in the future. So I don't think there is as much worry from employers, and I actually don't think there's much emphasis on, we want to employ you and we want you to stay in this company for the next 15 or 20 years. I think it makes a lot of sense, and the tech economy is still quite buoyant. There's a lot of roles that are in demand. It makes sense for employers to say, we're really happy if people choose to stay with us for 18 months or 2 years, because that's, we've got a lot out of people in that time. They've also learned skills, and perhaps they'll come back to us at some point in the future.
Nice. Now we've had another question here from David. Thank you, David. He says, thanks for the talk. Really interesting. So thank you, Christina. Let's read this. Have you considered at any point what the impact of AI might have on tech roles, particularly on individuals joining the industry? Some companies are moving away from junior roles as they feel that current AI tools can accomplish those tasks. Does this make the industry even more elitist? And how can individuals sidestep these additional hiring challenges?
It's something that really worries me, actually, because, for example, I'm a business analyst by background. A lot of the ways that junior business analysts learn their skills is to do things like helping facilitating workshops, writing up flip charts, creating process models by hand. If we can get AI to do all of those things, fairly instantaneously, meeting minutes, optical character recognition, changing hand-drawn things to typed up outputs, then what are the ways that people who are earlier in their careers get to learn and develop their skills. So
Yeah.
that's something that organisations and more senior tech professionals, that's something that we really need to think about and take seriously. How are we going to support and develop the next generation of tech professionals if some of the kind of easy to keep people busy activities and that we're giving some learning opportunities, if those are now replaced, if those don't exist, then we need to think about how we're going to replace that opportunity to learn. And digital apprenticeships have been massively well received, both by employers and learners as well. So we know that a lot of employers do want to still think about their next generation of tech professionals and give them the opportunities and the learning to be able to start their career really positively. But in terms of the day-to-day work, that is something that we need to think about very carefully, and making sure that we're not outsourcing learning opportunities to AI in our bid to speed up work.
Yeah, that's interesting. The last part of David's question was about individuals being able to sidestep those challenges. Do you think apprenticeships might be the route for that these days, more directly than a full computer science degree, for example?
I'd never say that apprenticeships are better or worse than universities. I think people, you do one or another for a lot of different reasons, and I think it's really great that people explore both and don't have too much tunnel vision. Or I'm definitely going to university, or I'm definitely doing an apprenticeship. I think it's absolutely important that people explore all of their opportunities, and not just young people. I did an apprenticeship later in life as well. That was also a master's degree. So I kind of went back and did a master's degree, which was also a level 7 apprenticeship in senior leadership alongside working. So apprenticeships and degrees aren't just for young people. In terms of how we can sidestep that, I think cultivating your own curiosity, being curious, wanting to find out things, wanting to keep your skills and knowledge up to date is the best way for all tech professionals to make sure that there's going to be a next job for you and that AI cannot replace you. So coming to events like this, engaging with BCS, reading articles, reading books, investing in your own professional development, attending conferences. It's also important to make sure that you remain as employable as possible.
That's excellent. Thank you for your question, David. Marcia's just followed up a little bit on the AI side, Christina. What is your view on AI automation on applications? The AI recruiting tools showed bias in the past.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the tools that bias, it's the data that they've been trained on. So we need to make sure that lots of different people are involved in creating both the data sets and also the algorithms that are being applied, so that we have that diversity of thought in the people that are creating the systems and the data. We need to actively look for things like biases in our data and see what can be amplified when we put these things into algorithms. Essentially, these algorithms are copying past human behavior of showing that biases. So we need to think about that. We need to think about the data and how we can detect biases in the data. I think, as somebody who's done a lot of recruitment in my career, when you're faced with having to sift 100 CVs manually, that's a lot of time taken up. So I absolutely encourage ways that we can speed up these processes, but in a way that still work for employers and people who are looking for jobs. We need to put some responsibility on job seekers, that you're not just creating an AI generated CV and using all the same language and the same examples as everybody else. It's absolutely important that you keep yourself in the information that you're providing, whether that's a CV or a job application. Don't outsource that job to AI, and then we'll hope that employers don't outsource all of their decision making to AI as well. I don't know any employers that would totally put those decisions into the hands of AI, but they are certainly looking for ways for it to be more efficient and both effective and efficient as as it can be for both employers and job seekers. So yeah, I think there's a responsibility on both sides there, not to rely too heavily on AI.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you for your question, Marta. Just a couple of other things maybe to wrap up with Christina, because we're 15 minutes now. We're well in. Thank you for your questions, by the way. Feel free to put any last ones in if you'd like to. But I'd like to ask you, first of all, is there anything that you wanted to include in the book that you couldn't? Maybe, we might get a follow-up or something like that.
So there's something that I wanted to do, which was talk about the skills required for each job. So kind of break each role down in quite a scientific way to say, it's this much of this role, it's this much problem solving, and it's this much communication, and it's this much coding. But what I wanted to do was something that would be quite data driven, and I didn't have the time or the data to make that work. So I think I'm might define somebody's master's research project there, or PhD research around careers in tech, because I'd love to see that really well quantified, exactly what skills are required for each of these roles. And that's a little bit what the quiz, the IT role quiz that the BCS have designed. It is data driven in that they asked a load of tech professionals, what are the skills that you need for your job? And they've used that to help drive how the questioning and how the funneling works in that quiz. But what I wanted to do was something that would have been a little bit more rigorous than that. But actually, I decided it was taking me down a route that was not going to be as beneficial as I thought for readers. So that's an idea that I still have in my mind, but I don't think the book is any poorer for not having it there.
No, and that sounds like it might have been twice the size, if not more.
Absolutely, yeah.
So David has just put another question here. Could you wrap the Sophia framework into what each type of job role entails? There is mapping in Sophia, isn't there, to pathways, as he says here.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Sophia framework is really useful for both employers and tech professionals to understand the career progression and the elements that go into making up lots of different roles. And what does it mean to be a junior project manager, compared to being a program manager, for example? How do you progress through that career? So I think Sophia has got a lot to offer, and it does try to break down the different roles into the constituent parts. So yeah, that's a good bit of signposting for people who haven't come across Sophia before, to have a look at that and see how it might help you navigate the roles that you're considering.
Absolutely. Thank you, David, for bringing that into the discussion. So last question, Christina, maybe just one to give us a bit of an insight into the book writing process. A lot of people think, oh, I'd like to write a book. They don't really get around to it. So tell us about your process from starting with your idea to actually doing it. How did you find all that?
So I actually should have moved forward much earlier with this idea. It was something that was going around in my head, something that I would talk to people about. And I didn't, I kind of actively avoid speaking to anybody in BCS publishing about it, because I was too worried. I was worried that they would say, oh, that's not a very good idea. I preferred to leave it as a possibility rather than try to pursue it and have someone say no. And I really regret that. And I think that is something that's holding a lot of people back in a lot of things that they would like to do. Oh, I'm thinking about this, but I'd rather leave it open as a possibility than try and pursue it and find out that it's not going to go anywhere. So I really wish that I'd moved forward with this much earlier, because it could have been in people's hands and helping people make good decisions about their careers much earlier as well. So I think there's something there, which is, if you've got an idea and you want to see it happen, actually commit the time yourself and make the inquiries and figure out how to move it forward. And then the other thing about actually writing a book is that you have to just sit down and write it. You make a plan, kind of outline structure of how you think it's going to work. That probably is going to change through the process of writing the book in terms of the chapters, subsections, and so on. And I just found it really useful to chunk it up as much as possible, right? I want to write half a page or a couple of paragraphs on this topic. And then that meant that I didn't run away on any one topic. I didn't go too deep in one area at the expense of other areas. And just literally managed it like a to-do list on a spreadsheet. I want to do a couple of sentences on this or a couple of paragraphs on this, and work through ticking things off as I'd done them. The other thing that people writing both fiction and non-fiction, I think, find is that you can lose yourself for days and days in research. At some point, you have to actually say, right, I'm not doing any more research on this now. I'm going to write what I can on this topic. And if there's something that I hit up against that means I actually have to go and do a bit more reading or a bit more research, I'll do it at that point. We don't have to front load all of the research that we think we need to do.
Interesting. Well, thank you for that insight, Christina. Obviously, we're pleased that you've written the book. You can speak to the friendly members of the publishing team if you have an idea. And I can say that because I'm not a member of the publishing team, so they're all fine. So don't worry about them. I'd like to thank you for speaking to us today. It's been really interesting. We're going to say that your book can be found on the BCS Bookshop, of course. Discount codes are available. It's also on Amazon and other good booksellers. And we're getting a couple of thanks coming to the chat. So thank you for the thanks, folks, as well. We've enjoyed the session today. Yeah, it's been really good. And
if anyone wants to keep up with me, I am on LinkedIn. I'd be very happy to connect.
Lovely. Thank you for that, Christina, as well. And thank you, everyone, for your attendance. The next session, next author webinar is with Alison Holt on data governance. That's on the 25th of March. So join us for that one as well. But for now, thank you, Christina, and we'll bring this one to an end.